Hello, hello. If you are here, if I had to guess, you've probably recently been diagnosed with PCOS, or you've had PCOS for a while and you're just really struggling on figuring out what to eat, how to manage your symptoms, and ultimately get back to a normal cycle. I'm Lauren, a holistic PCOS dietitian, and guess what? I have PCOS myself. So I feel very passionate about helping women in their 20s through early 40s regulate their cycles, improve their fertility, and forget that they even have PCOS in the first place. In today's video, I'm walking you through how exactly to eat for your PCOS with a very simple plate method. This is the same method that I use with my clients to balance their blood sugar, manage frustrating symptoms like hair loss, acne, and fatigue, and to finally get their periods back to normal. So we're going to talk through what to put on your plate, why each piece of the plate matters, and how you can start applying this right away. And before we jump in, I know you want more PCOS support, so hit that subscribe button below and you will get updates when I release new videos. Okay, I know you're here to learn, so let's jump in. So we are going to review the plate method today. This is something that you may have been introduced to before. I know a lot of my clients have heard of this, but the reality is a lot of people aren't truly putting it into practice. So I want to review this with you. If you have heard this before, if you haven't, welcome. I'm excited for you to learn this plate method. And what I really love most about this is that it's simple, and the visual is so helpful for people when they are looking at recipes or they have a bunch of food in front of them at an event. They can visualize this on their plate and know what to put on their plate. So starting with the top right, we've got protein. Protein is going to take up about a quarter of your plate, and then another quarter of your plate is going to be carbohydrates. The biggest piece here that I see a lot of people miss is making half of their plate non-starchy vegetables. This is absolutely huge when it comes to PCOS. And then the last piece of the plate is fats. And it is a small piece, but it is a mighty piece and very important. So we're gonna dig into all the specifics of each piece on this plate, starting with protein. Okay, we all know that protein is important here, okay? The biggest thing with protein is that it is helping manage our blood sugar. By managing our blood sugar, it's helping with our appetite, it's improving metabolism, it's improving mood, and it's really helping boost our energy. So by doing all of that, it can also really help keep those cravings at bay. And so many of my PCOS clients really struggle with cravings, especially later towards the end of the day. Protein also helps build and maintain muscle mass, which is huge for blood sugar management as well. The more muscle we have on our body, the faster our metabolism is, the more efficient we are at processing glucose, and ultimately we see an improvement then in insulin resistance. So what counts as a protein? So here are your whole food sources. I do want to point out, while lentils and beans do count as a wonderful source of protein, they are technically more so considered a carbohydrate. They have more carbohydrates per gram compared to protein, but nonetheless, a wonderful source of protein, especially if you are using lentils or beans as your carb choice. Okay, so where I recommend starting with protein is getting at least 20 to 25 grams at every single meal of the day. You might have heard getting 30 grams per meal, and I totally stand by that. I think that's maybe a better minimum to strive for. However, I like to be really realistic with goals. And you might have multiple meals a day where you're only getting maybe 10 to 15 grams. So to double or even triple that to 30 is a big shift and can feel like too hard of a change for you. So we want to take baby steps and just make sure breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day are getting at least that 20 grams, certainly striving closer to that 30 grams if possible. Okay, so that's protein, and whether or not you're counting grams, if you can just really focus on that quarter plate of, your plate being protein, you're definitely in a good spot. Now, just so you know, with my clients, some other things that I review with them in depth through my learning modules are talking about collagen, going over complete versus incomplete proteins, how much protein to actually eat for your body, eating for exercise and the timing of protein with exercise. And they also get a bunch of protein guides, one of those including a list of all of the foods with protein and exactly how much protein is in that food, so they can print it off and have a really simple guide to keep in the kitchen as they're making their meals and try to figure out about how much protein they might be getting in their meal without having to like track in an app. Now, if you feel like you need way more help with protein now, you don't actually have to be one of my clients. I have a PCOS protein playbook, which is a guide that covers how to calculate protein needs without overcomplicating it, a comprehensive list of protein-rich foods and exactly how much protein they provide, how to go about tracking protein in a way that feels good to you, the importance of taking time to reflect, when striving for more protein becomes an unhealthy goal, where to start if you're feeling overwhelmed, protein powder, protein bar, and protein drink recommendations for when you need to supplement, and high protein recipes that are practical, satisfying, and easy to make. By the end, I hope that people will feel more confident in hitting their protein goals in a way that best supports their PCOS. Okay, the next piece we are going to talk about is half of that plate, and that is non-starchy vegetables. This is arguably one of the most important pieces of the plate when it comes to PCOS. I know we put so much emphasis on protein and having lots of protein, not having a ton of carbs, and we totally miss out on half of the plate. We want more vegetables because they are rich in fiber, which is going to keep us full, great for gut health, helping with blood sugar balancing. They are super rich in antioxidants. So all those different colors that we get from vegetables are rich in things called polyphenols. They have anti-inflammatory properties that help lower inflammation. And in case you didn't know, women with PCOS tend to have higher levels of inflammation. So we really want to do as much as we can to lower inflammation with food. Vegetables are also great for liver detoxification, which is good for hormones. I mentioned the fiber is good for gut health, and also just other properties that we get from vegetables is really healing and lovely for gut health. And did I mention that they're really great at lowering inflammation? Because they are great at lowering inflammation, and this is one of the most critical pieces with PCOS. Also, if you are struggling with weight loss, vegetables are incredibly nutrient dense while at the same time pretty low in calories. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, filling up on tons of vitamins and minerals and fiber that can help keep you full without getting too many calories. Now, I'm not a huge fan of getting really intense with calorie counting and also having huge deficits in our calories. I see way too many people eating well below the number of calories that they should have. So this is a benefit of working individually with a dietitian who can help you figure out the appropriate amount of calories that is enough to make sure your body is getting what it needs, but also isn't in excess that could be contributing to maybe some weight gain. So here is a list of whole food sources of non-starchy vegetables. We've got different dark leafy greens I list, some cruciferous vegetables, which are really great for estrogen detoxification, by the way, and then just a whole list of other vegetables that count as a non-starchy veg. Fermented vegetables count, like kimchi and sauerkraut. Also, herbs are wonderful. They're full of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties. Highly recommend trying to cook more with fresh herbs. And then also various sprouts and microgreens. So where to start with non-starchy vegetables? I do recommend trying to get at least 3 servings a day. So 1 serving will be 1 cup of vegetables or 2 cups of raw leafy greens. Now, a lot of you might look at this plate method and be like, oh my God, I never eat vegetables at breakfast. Like, what do I do to try to get more veggies at breakfast? Well, it's a great added benefit to start your day with some veggies at breakfast, whether that's adding veggies to a smoothie or maybe having some sort of like egg bake that has veggies incorporated, or like an egg scramble or omelet, or just some sort of protein bowl with maybe broccoli and a ground meat and some potatoes or something like that. Those are just examples. But if you really don't want to get veggies at breakfast, that's totally fine. As long as you're getting a vegetable serving at lunch and dinner and having your lunch and dinner really following this plate method. And then you can also have get veggies in at snacks, perhaps. That's always an option. Or you can really bulk up the amount of veggies that you're getting between lunch and dinner, so you're hitting those 3 servings between those 2 meals. So if you're not getting them at breakfast, that's okay. A lot of people don't. It's not a typical breakfast food that we might find. Again, certainly lovely to add in, but don't worry if you're not. Just make sure you're getting those 3 servings somewhere else. And if you're already getting 3 servings, highly recommend increasing that. Really, it's 3 plus. If you can get maybe 4 or 5 servings of those non-starchy vegetables, that's going to be really wonderful, as long as it's well tolerated. When we're increasing vegetables, we're increasing our fiber intake, so sometimes that can be a little disruptive to our gut. Just make sure you're drinking plenty of water with the increase in fiber intake. A few other things that I review with my clients in learning modules is going over the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and also talking about some nuances and things to know when it comes to eating canned vegetables and frozen vegetables. Okay, the third piece of the plate to cover is carbohydrates. This is a really big topic. I tend to get the most questions around carbohydrates, and I just want to start by saying we love carbs. Carbs are good. Carbs are not bad. It all comes down to context. Our body wants carbohydrates because it is the best, quickest energy for all of the cells in our body. So we need to eat them every day. We need them. However, like I said, it comes down to context. What I mean by that is we want to think about the types of carbs, we want to think about the amount of carbs we are eating, and we want to think about what we eat with our carbohydrates. So we are going to start by talking about the types of carbs to focus on. Okay, so here is a list of the whole food sources of carbohydrates. We've got beans and lentils, which if you remember, those are in the protein list. They do give us some protein, but primarily a carbohydrate. We've got root vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes, winter squash, peas, plantains, corn, various whole grains, fresh and frozen fruit, and dairy. Now, some of the dairy foods do also count as a protein. Dairy foods also provide us with fat. And so some foods you'll notice contain multiple parts of the plate, and things like milk, kefir cheese, plain yogurt, not Greek yogurt, those are going to be more primarily carbohydrate, whereas things like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, these are going to be primarily a protein and have lower levels of carbohydrates. So it can get a little confusing, but just know in general, dairy is going to provide both of these things. Depending on the type of dairy, might be a wonderful source of protein and also might provide some fat. I also want to mention some other nutritious carbohydrates that maybe aren't necessarily a whole food carb that is found in its whole form, but still can be included in a healthy, balanced diet. So we've got whole grain, floury products like bread, bagels, English muffins, pasta, wraps, crackers, bean and lentil pastas are wonderful, popcorn, grits, these are very minimally processed corn products, and then dried fruit. While it's really important to me to focus on the things we want to add into our diet, I do want to also show you a list of processed forms of carbohydrates that I want you to keep in mind, that I don't necessarily think we need to totally eliminate from our diet. I do not believe in that. But with PCOS and with blood sugar issues, we really need to be mindful of how much of our diet is filled with these types of carbs. And that is non-whole grain, floury foods. I just mentioned whole grain options. Those are wonderful. The non-whole grain, they're going to be slightly more processed, less fiber. Fried foods like chips and French fries, liquids that contain carbohydrates. So things like oat milk, coconut water, fruit juice, soda, lemonade, flavored milks, etc., etc. It's not that some of these are bad. It's just we need to be aware that they have carbs. And we can get into issues sometimes where we are including a lot of different maybe liquids and foods and stuff in a meal that some of them are really nutritious carbs, some of them are less nutritious carbs, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of carbohydrates. And so I just want people to be aware of what will actually have them. Moving on, all sorts of desserts, we know that these are going to have carbohydrates. Now, it's going to range a ton as far as how many carbs based on the type of dessert and how it's sweetened. Fruit products like canned or dried fruit with added sugar, jams or jellies, pre-made smoothies you buy at the store. And then sweeteners are also going to have carbohydrates, both your natural sweeteners like honey, maple syrup, and your more processed sweeteners like cane sugar. Okay, so next, talking about the amount of carbs. Now, we're going off the plate method. So really, if you can focus as much as you can on just having that quarter of your plate carbohydrates, you should be in a pretty good place. To give you some examples of numbers though, there was a study that found that women with PCOS eating less than 45% of their calories coming from carbohydrates, which they considered a low carb diet, had a lot of improvements in BMI, cholesterol, insulin resistance and blood sugar levels, and some hormones like lowering testosterone, increasing sex hormone binding globulin, which plays a role in testosterone levels. So having less than 45% of your calories coming from carbohydrates can be really beneficial. Now, this means nothing to you unless we talk about some numbers. So let's say someone should be eating around 1,900 calories a day. If they were eating 30% of their calories from carbohydrates, this would come out to be about 140 grams of carbs. So that's still a pretty decent amount. It's definitely not a situation where you have to completely avoid carbs at all costs. If you're eating 140 carbs per day, you're probably getting around 40 grams of carbs at each meal and then a little bit left over for a snack. So I hope this shows you that you absolutely do not have to totally cut out all carbs. We just need to be mindful of how much. Okay, the last thing I'm gonna touch on with carbohydrates is what we should be eating with our carbs. This is the third thing to consider when it comes to the context of eating carbohydrates. So the biggest thing to focus on is not eating naked carbs. What I mean by this is whenever you're eating a carbohydrate, try to make sure that there's a protein, fat, or non-starchy vegetable with it. Ideally, all of those things, if it is a meal. If it's a snack, try to get some sort of protein or fat with that. So for example, if you're eating an apple for a snack, maybe have some apple and peanut butter or have some apple and cheese. Or if you really like to eat pasta for dinner, now after this video, hopefully you reassess and maybe don't have pasta for dinner every night, right? We want to try to have more of some of those whole food carbohydrates. But if you really love pasta, that's cool. Where can we get some vegetables in? Are you having a side salad before you eat the pasta? Are you loading the sauce with maybe tons of vegetables like spinach and onions and mushrooms? And are you getting some protein in there? Making sure you're adding in maybe some ground beef or some chicken meatballs or fish. There's so much more to talk about when it comes to carbohydrates. So a few of the things that I review with my clients in my learning modules are reading a food label, which that goes beyond carbohydrates, but it's important to understand the different pieces of the food label in the context of carbs, the best way to eat carbs, so some more tips beyond not eating naked carbs, real sugar versus sugar alternatives, which I know is a big topic, all of the different types of sugar-sweetened beverages and what to know about them, because we really don't want to be drinking our calories and drinking our sugar and carbohydrates as much as possible. And then fiber and whole grains. Okay, moving on to the last piece of the plate, and that is the small little circle that we have labeled as fats. And like I said earlier, a small part of the plate, but a very important piece of the plate. We want to get enough fats because they can serve as a form of energy, especially when we are eating less calories. They are essential for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, which is vitamins A, E, D, and K. Fat helps make cholesterol. And while we typically associate cholesterol with being bad, it's actually the precursor to our hormones. So we do need some cholesterol. We don't want too much, but we do need some. So think progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, DHEA. These are all things that we need to a certain extent in the body for certain things to function properly, for our cycles to function properly, and they are all derived from cholesterol. And lastly, fats are essential for good brain health, for lowering inflammation, just like those veggies, and blood sugar management, of course. Here is a list of all of the sources that we will get fat from. So there's some plant-based sources, there's some animal-based sources. These are all places you're gonna get fat. There's many different types of fat, but there are some that we really want to emphasize when it comes to PCOS. Now these are nuts, seeds, omega-3 containing fish, olives, and avocados. Why do we want to focus on these? Because these are known to be anti-inflammatory, and I've already mentioned the importance of lowering inflammation when it comes to PCOS, so we really want to focus on getting enough of these in our diet. Now, some other things that I review with fats with my clients through my learning modules are all of the different types of fats. So we have saturated fats, trans fats, unsaturated fats. We have omega-3 and omega-6 fats, which are two types of unsaturated fats. One tends to be more anti-inflammatory, which is omega-3s. Omega-6s tend to be more pro-inflammatory. So all the things to know about those. I talk about seed oils, which, by the way, if you want to learn more about seed oils and my take on seed oils and PCOS, check out this video. And I also talk about other cooking oils and the best ones to focus on, and the context of cholesterol, which I kind of touched on today. Okay, so there you have it, your beautiful, balanced plate to start moving forward with taking care of your PCOS. Now, if you want meal ideas that follow this framework, I have a free handout called the PCOS Glow Up Meals, and it's 3 days of breakfast, lunches, dinners, snacks, and desserts that are really yummy, satisfying, and non-restrictive. And hey, if you are ready to get individualized support for your PCOS, I invite you to schedule a free 30-minute discovery call with me. This is a no-pressure call that just allows you to share what you've been struggling with, and then we can see if we would be a good fit for each other. Thanks so much for listening. I definitely invite you to check out some of my other videos, and don't forget to click that subscribe button.